From past experience, this is not the first time that a Hamas leader has been assassinated. Everyone is replaceable, including Haniyeh. He was an important figure, but he wasn't the most important figure in Hamas today. That person would be Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in Gaza, who's underground in a bunker now for 300 days after perpetrating the atrocities against Israel on October 7th. The names that were mentioned in the previous report are all relevant and all could replace Ismail Haniyeh. They will make a decision of consensus amongst the leadership, and the person who is selected by them will be accepted by the movement as the new leader.
And you don't see any change of direction from Hamas after that?
There are degrees of how extreme those different people are and how close they are to Iran, or how much they are willing to perhaps accept the idea of a Palestinian state in the territories occupied by Israel in 1967. But the differences are not that great. I have personal experiences with Dr. Khalil Haya, the number 2 after Yahya Sinwar. I found him to be one of the most extreme people in Hamas. But Khalid Mashal also is unpredictable. It comes out with very extreme comments. Musa Abu Marzouk, who was reported to be a moderate voice, is also one of the ideologues of this movement, and he has positions that are presented in different ways to different audiences. So I don't think it really makes that big a difference of who the leader will be. They have a consensus-making policy where they arrive at decisions together, and the person who sits in the head of the number 1 seat is not that important.
Let's look at the situation there in Israel. I mean, renewed criticism, isn't there, of Benjamin Netanyahu, some asking if he's really serious about peace when, assuming Israel did do it, he's just assassinated Hamas's main negotiator.
Well, I don't think anyone in Israel was talking about peace. We are talking about a ceasefire in Gaza, a perhaps end of the war, and a return of the 115 Israeli hostages who are still in Gaza, and no one knows how many of them are alive. We're very far away from talking about peace. But the talks on a ceasefire were deadlocked before the assassination of Haniyeh, when Netanyahu sent his head of Mossad to a meeting in Rome this week with the head of the CIA, the head of Egyptian intelligence, and the Qatari prime minister, where Mr. Netanyahu delivered additional conditions and red lines on the original Israeli proposal, which Hamas responded to with a definite no at that point. It seems very difficult to resume those negotiations. The Qatari prime minister said, how are we supposed to negotiate when one side kills the head negotiator of the other side? And this is a big problem that we're facing right now. I think it's time for the negotiators, the Egyptians and the Qataris, to put a deal of their own on the table. They know what the points of view of both sides are, and they should tell Israel and Hamas, this is the deal, take it or leave it. As I mentioned, we are now day 300 since this war began, the longest war that Israel has ever fought, the most tragic and horrific results of this war, with tens of thousands of people killed in Gaza and tens of thousands of new orphans and 2 million homeless people in Gaza, and all the suffering that the Israelis have faced on 2 fronts, on the Lebanese front and the Gaza front. It's really time for the international community to weigh in much more heavily and help us end this war.
Have they not already been trying to do that, though? I mean, as you say, it's been a long time now. We've had efforts from all sorts of different people, including the US as well. I mean, is there any real hope, do you think, for a ceasefire?
There's always hope for a ceasefire, but I think that the sides need additional pushing. I think there needs to be leverage put on Iran to restrain itself in its response on the violation of its sovereignty. Hezbollah needs to be reined in by the state of Lebanon and the allies of Lebanon, and Israel needs to be reined in by its allies, primarily the United States and the United Kingdom. International efforts could be made. There will be an additional session in the Security Council. If there could ever be agreement between the United States, Russia, and China, there could be a meaningful resolution calling for ceasefire and using international power to enforce a ceasefire. This is what we really need to happen. Right now, Netanyahu doesn't seem willing to end the war. He wants his victory picture, which in his mind is the killing of the Hamas leaders in Gaza. But they've been trying to do that for 10 months now and have not yet succeeded. That doesn't mean that they won't, but it may take considerably more time. And by that time, most of the hostages will probably be dead.
And just finally, I mean, the events of this week, both in Tehran and also in Beirut, I mean, do you have more of a fear now that this is likely to spiral into something else now?
It certainly could. Once we're on the path of escalation, we don't know if it can be controlled or if it will get out of control. The horrific bombing that took place on Saturday on the soccer field in the Druze village of Majd al-Shams in the Golan Heights that killed 12 children is the example of something which wasn't planned, it wasn't intended, but brought about horrific consequences with the Israeli response and the assassinations, and now there'll be similar responses coming from Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas. If innocent people are killed, if rockets hit a school or a bus or a shopping mall or someplace where there are a lot of civilian casualties, it will lead to additional escalation. It could be restrained if the response is restrained, and that's what we hope will happen. But we're all on high alert now for the chances of more escalation in a much wider war.